Good evening, and thank you for coming. My name is Renee Lauber, and I am a board member with the Marquette Neighborhood Association. I'll be your moderator for the evening. Tonight's forum is brought to you by a coalition of neighborhood associations, including Marquette, Tenny Lapham, Schenck Atwood, Darbo Worthington, and Capital Neighborhoods. Tonight's event is also sponsored by the Homeless Services Consortium of Madison, and we thank all of you who are able to donate to our food and clothing drive that's out in the lobby. Our media partners are WRT-FM and Isthmus. We are being broadcast live on WART 89.9 FM and web streamed online at wartfm.org and isthmus.com. Before I go through the details of the forum, I would like to ask all of you to join me in a moment of silence to reflect on the tragic shooting in our community and the death of Tony Robinson. Thank you. Tonight's forum will last 90 minutes, and we will give each candidate 3 minutes to respond to questions with the option of a 30-second rebuttal. The timekeeper is in the front, Nicola, and she's got some signs there. You want to show everybody? Clear and easy to read. 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then a nice stop sign. This week we have been collecting questions from the sponsoring groups online. Some of those will be the questions that are used tonight. In addition, we will also be taking questions here tonight throughout the forum. There are ushers in the aisles. You should have all gotten index cards. Please write down your questions and pass them back to one of the ushers, and they will be brought up to me throughout the evening. We had a coin toss, and Mayor Soglin will start this evening. Tonight we have with us Mayor Paul Soglin and Alder Scott Resnick, your two candidates for Madison Mayor. Mayor Soglin will start first. We have 4-minute opening statements. Mayor Soglin.
Thank you, and thanks to all the dedicated people of the City of Madison who are here tonight concerned about the future of our community. 4 years ago, I was concerned about the financial solvency of the city and its impairment in terms of dealing with what I thought was the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue facing us was poverty and the inequities within our community. My critics said I didn't know what I was talking about. One of them even said that there were no troubled neighborhoods in Madison, to quote him directly. Well, we went to work. We went to work immediately. And I want to first refer to the Race to Equity study, because as I do this presentation, I'll be making some references to it. The point being, that study focused on data from the year 2011. We've now got data from 2013, which shows the effects and the progress that we've made. And when I talk about that as a community, I am no way implying or suggesting that the situation is acceptable. And I don't even, by any stretch of the imagination, suggest that the standards of what is going on in the rest of the United States is an admirable or acceptable goal. Our goal is to eliminate inequity. Our goal is to eliminate poverty and all the various challenges that come with it in terms of academics, in terms of employment, in terms of early childhood development. We made a number of changes. You might be familiar with the neighborhood resource teams. We put them to work with a restructuring of how certain city services are provided. I joined city staff and neighborhood people walking the streets in Meadowood, Darbo Worthington, meeting an abandoned house in Teresa Terrace. And out of that came new standards for city employment, how we do our hiring, changing the qualifications. Eventually, we were to adopt an ordinance banning the box, that box at the front of many job applications that indicate any arrest record or conviction. The minimum qualifications were changed. Things that I thought we had solved years ago had to be addressed. The fact that we were still constituting oral interview panels that were all white males was unacceptable. We went into seasonal employment, which is a path road for city employment. We produced a youth internship program, which has now added a net of over 700 new summer jobs. We joined in with United Way in the private sector in creating a hire program, 200 full-time jobs that will be committed for sustainable employment. We joined with them also on an early childhood born learning program, an initiative that's not received enough attention. We listened to the teenagers at Owl Creek and put in a $300,000 commitment to provide bus service to the community. We instituted a disparity study, which is going to change how city contracts are implemented. And we've got a construction employment initiative, and we're dealing with the questions of food and access to nutritious fresh food in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Soglin. And now to you, Alder Resnick.
Ideas of the past are not going to solve the problems of the future. And I'll say that again. Ideas of the past are not going to solve the problems of the future. Mayor Soglin took office for a 7th term roughly 4 years ago today. He dedicated that we were going to focus on 3 areas. We were going to focus on poverty, on equity, on fiscal responsibility, and we were going to do it by working together. So let's review that record. On poverty, and particularly homelessness, homelessness in Madison has increased 41% in the last 4 years. Right now, the city of Madison is serving over 1,000 homeless students. We have individuals that are sleeping outside our city hall. Tonight, they've been doing it for an extended period of time. The mayor's response, at a previous debate, it was to blame Ronald Reagan. At times it's been to blame the county executive. It's to blame the city council members. We take a look at issues of equity in our community, particularly the arrest disparities that we see between men of color and the rest of the community. Depending on whose statistics you look at, it's either 8-to-1, 11-to-1. I tried today to look up what the 2014 statistics were, and we couldn't even find them online because we don't have an accountable process that's transparent to our own residents. Now for this, when we had 1,500 students protesting in front of City Hall saying, "What are we going to do?" we heard, "This is the fault of the federal government. This is the fault of our state." When we talk about fiscal responsibility and we look at things like Judge Doyle Square, where right now our city has spent over $1 million in the planning process and we still haven't moved forward, when we look forward to neighborhood centers that don't have operating expenditures outlined, when we look at our large deficits that we're going to be facing in the next 4 years, we heard it's the city council's fault. We have not been looking for collaborative solutions where we're working together, the city council, the mayor's office, our county, our nonprofits, our for-profits, trying to build a better Madison. So let's talk about the Madison of the next 4 years. Let's talk about how we address homelessness by building a day resource center to ensure that if someone needs immediate care, where they have issues of substance abuse, where we have therapy and job counseling right next door, let's ensure that we're investing our money in child care programs to make sure that students, before they enter the Madison School District, are equally equipped as all of their peers. Let's ensure that we're modernizing City Hall, that we're finding innovations in our library system and working to provide equitable and more efficient services through new forms of technology. And let's do this collaboratively. Let's do this together, because we have really big problems in our city. We're resting on our laurels. And I know if we're all working together, we can accomplish so much more, and our city will be a bright future for the next 40 years.
Thank you, Alder Resnick. And now on to the questions. We decided to start with a question related to the March 6th shooting death of Tony Robinson. And before we go into that, the Marquette Neighborhood Association with Tony's family and the Wilmar Center have been working to have a neighborhood forum directly related to that topic. That will be next Friday, I believe, at 6 p.m. It will be more of a discussion and a dialogue format, different from this, which is focused on as a format for the candidates. I just wanted to announce that and let everybody know that that is there. So the question. 2 weeks ago, Tony Robinson, a young unarmed man, was fatally shot by a police officer on Willie Street. A couple of years ago, Paulie Heenan, another unarmed man, was fatally shot by a police officer. What did you learn from the Heenan shooting, and what concrete policies have you tried to enact to prevent similar incidences from happening in the future? We'll start with Mayor Soglin.
If you look at the officer-involved shootings here in Madison, as well as those around the country, there are a number of characteristics that that we see, and I really don't have any facts that go beyond what you know in regards to the shooting of Tony Robinson. I read Isthmus today. I don't know if that story is accurate or not. But in terms of the other instances, what characterizes all of them, the ones that have already been examined and studied, what characterizes them is that in each one of those instances, an individual approached the officer and did not stop. And one of the basic rules, and I learned this in my own youth in terms of demonstrations, is that when you're confronted with an officer, you've got two options. You either stop or you drop and go limp. But you do not keep moving towards the officer.
Please, let's let the candidates speak. Thank you. I'd like to give the Mayor Soglin some more time, and let's hear from the candidates. We have other forums. I understand that this is a difficult time for Madison and our neighborhood. We would all like answers, but if we don't let our candidates speak, we will all go home without any answers. Mayor, please.
One of the significant changes that has occurred, and it's something that was implemented just recently, was assigning a group of officers to specialize and work in the area of mental health, to address the challenges of what do you do when you encounter an individual who is not going to follow directions or orders And are there ways and are there techniques of dealing with that challenge? One of the things that's been overlooked in this discussion is characterized by the incident that happened before the night of March 6th, where we had an armed individual firing multiple shots at police officers. And in that particular instance, the officers were able to resolve the matter without the kind...
Please. This is going to be a challenging evening, and I can understand that. I understand that there are people here tonight to give voice to Tony Robinson's death, and we respect that. But others came here tonight to make an informed vote in April, and we would just really appreciate it if we could have the opportunity to allow them to hear from the candidates so that when they go to the polls on April 7th, they can make an informed choice. Yes, you do, and maybe you would like to hear from the candidates also. So again, Mayor Soglin, you were interrupted. Are you done? Thank you. Alder Resnick, the same question.
Elected leaders need to do more for our community. And regardless of your thoughts of what occurred on that night, what we need to do is have a true conversation about the arrest disparities in our community, how we have uses of force, how we have training, and how we have protocols for the Madison Police Department. Now, there's a number of officers out there that are there to protect the community. But what we know is that we can do better. We have a responsibility to have the strongest protocols anywhere in the country right here in Madison, Wisconsin. So when we have members of our community coming to us and saying, we feel like there's an issue with over-policing, it means that we listen to those concerns, we investigate those concerns, and have a conversation about where we go from here. When we talk about issues of better accountability, and I talked about it in the opening, to make sure that we have strong practices in place where we know what our data shows us, because if we don't have data-driven solutions, how do we know if we're having improvement to the system? What it's going to take and what this community needs are these conversations. They're tough. They're tough for every single elected leader. They're tough for the officers involved. They're tough for members of the community, and there's many people that are grieving. And they're going to continue to grieve. So when we have these serious conversations, what folks want to see are results. Because right now, there is an issue with the status quo. Now, I believe that we can make progress here. But it's going to take working together. It's going to take new voices at the table. It's going to take solutions from everyone in this room. It's going to take the leveraging of the expertise not only of our police department, but also those at the university, the college systems, and the individuals who have grown up right here in Madison. Because right now, I am listening. I may not have every solution, but I know our community can have results.
Thank you. Mayor Soglin, would you like a chance for a rebuttal? 30 seconds.
The city of Madison has a choice. It has a choice as to whether it wants to engage leadership that talks about talking or actually goes out and listens and performs. I didn't wait 4 years for this to happen. I was in the parking lot of McDonald's with 17-year-old kids, listening to them and what they wanted, the importance of employment, the importance of a city that would support them in a career.
Thank you. The next question is on racial disparities. It will be answered first by Alder Resnick and then Mayor Soglin. Dane County and Madison are doing well economically relative to the rest of the state. Yet we have widespread disparities in well-being. When it comes to our residents of color, what do you propose we do to build a more diverse middle class? Alder Resnick.
It's one of the biggest challenges that face the future of Madison. It's ensuring that we have a middle class that's represented by everybody. And it's going to be a two-generational approach. It's not going to happen overnight. But it starts young. It starts with child care opportunities and ensuring that every single student, no matter what your skin color is, no matter what your socioeconomic level is, that you are ensuring that you have child care in place early on. It's about, as someone's growing up, it's about mentorship. And it's making sure that there's a support network that makes sure that not a single student is failing. And it's going to take a lot of us to be able to step up to make sure that no one's falling through the cracks. And it is talking about job creation. It's job creation that's going into the 21st century. You know, right now, President Obama put forward a $100 million initiative in technology. And it wasn't necessarily to create the programming jobs, but it was to make sure that individuals of color, and particularly women, are involved in the growth of our economy right here in the United States. Because for all those tech jobs that we have, there's customer service. There's account managers, there's sales, there's strong paying career paths that have nothing to do with even engineering. But it's assuring that right now we're able to build a community that doesn't have barriers, that we're able to de-silo our issues that are in the city of Madison. Now, while my last years as a member of the tech community, I've been a champion of focusing on issues of diversity, to make sure that our companies are not just white like me, because it's an issue that we face. It's an issue that when you look at the ACT exams throughout the entire state of Wisconsin, and when you see 5 individuals of color passing the computer science exam, I wonder to myself, where am I going to find those next employees in our city? We have big challenges to tackle here. It's about eliminating those silos, but it's being everyone right here being a part of the solution.
Thank you. Mayor Soglin?
Keep in mind the question of data, and keep in mind what Alderman Resnick said in terms of ideas of the past are not going to serve or solve the problems of the future. The Race to Equity report showed that there was a disparity in Madison and Dane County in unemployment of approximately 20%. That was in 2011. In 2013, that number dropped to 12%. Something happened, an 8% reduction in the unemployment disparity. In terms of child poverty, the report showed that approximately 70% of African American children were in households below the poverty rate. For Madison, by 2013, that number had dropped 20%, down to 51. In terms of median income, the Race to Equity report showed a disparity of 45% in 2011. It dropped to 27%. I said earlier, the present numbers from 2013 are not acceptable, but something happened between 2011 and 2013 that brought change in the right direction, not insignificant change. When we start talking about numbers, we've got to know what their meaning is. Yes, there was a 41% increase in homelessness over that period of time, but virtually all of it occurred in 1 year. It occurred basically over a 3-month period of time. It occurred in the first 3 months of 2011. It accompanied what was happening at the square and the response to Act 10. But we are now under construction over here on Resnick on 50 units of affordable housing. We'll be breaking ground next month. It's the first of a goal of almost 1,100 affordable housing units to be built throughout the city of Madison under the Housing First proposal. It's going to be financed. It's going to be financed through a combination of tax credits and using extensions of 1 year on closing out TIFs to create an average of a $5 million a year revenue to create that housing, which Alderman Resnick opposes. And speaking of Resnick over there, the only members of the City Council who oppose that project are the ones who are supporting him. Let's decide whether we're going to go with rhetoric or we're going to go with substance.
"30-second rebuttal."
Yeah, I'm going to respond to that. You want to take the numbers themselves? Let's talk about, as the city of Madison left the recession, who was hit harder. You take a look at the numbers and we're saying that this is action from the city of Madison, or was it national economy trends? We still have major issues in the community, and you know, when it comes to housing first, I absolutely supported it. We were there with other members of the city council because that's my time.
Thank you. If you are just joining us now on the radio or online, this is the Madison Mayoral Forum, sponsored by the 5 East Side and downtown neighborhoods and by the Homeless Services Consortium of Madison. We are being broadcast live on WART 89.9 FM Madison and isthmus.com. I am your moderator, Renee Lauber. We're asking questions of our 2 candidates, Mayor Paul Soglin and Alder Scott Resnick. The next question regards a day shelter. A proposed day shelter to provide services to our homeless residents has now been years in the making. What has made this endeavor so difficult, and what will it take to make it happen? I believe we're starting this one with Mayor Soglin. Did I get it wrong?
I refer to the county board supervisor who wrote a letter explaining what happened about the day shelter. But before I do that, I've got to take a moment to thank Alderman Resnick for his final comments on the last subject, because it gives me the opportunity to point out that the closing of those gaps that I described from 11 to 13 did not occur in the United States, did not even occur in the region, and did not occur in the rest of the state of Wisconsin. Go look at the CSA data and you will see that unequivocally. Now, what happened is, despite the city's cooperation with the county on the Resnick project, despite the city's cooperation on a number of challenges in dealing with the questions of poverty and equity, the county made a mistake. And I got enough problems running the city without running the county. But what happened is this. The county selected a site on Lean Road. And as I tell the rest of the story, please keep in mind that if they hadn't bailed out incorrectly, we'd have the facility today. So what happened is Alderman Clausius asked to see the records to make sure it was permissible for the zoning. That was all that happened, to make sure it was okay to have it there under the existing zoning. And for some reason, county government decided to switch, thinking that this was criticism of the site, and not revealing that they had failed to check when the present tenant of the site was going to vacate.
Our goal is to have a respectful environment here where everyone can speak, including the candidates. If you have a question, the way to get a response is to write it down and hand it in. I just got 2 right here. Thank you. Mayor Soglin, would you like more time?
Yes, I do, and
Please
I'm
give
going
him
to
an
finish
additional minute.
on this note. As a leader of this community, I make a pledge that wherever I go, that I am going to do all I can to stop violence within this community. That's why in the 1990s, I worked so hard until the state stepped in to try and stop the proliferation of guns in our community. That's why I've worked nationally with organizations dedicated to it. And I suggest that everyone, whether they are a leader or not, make a pledge that they will do everything within their capacity to convey the message that we are a community of peace and civility, and that we will do all within our power to share that with our friends, neighbors, and our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Resnick.
As we talk about the Resnick site and housing first, I would just want to remind the mayor that when it came to the vote on the Plan Commission, which I serve, I was there to vote yes. When I was there to vote on the City Council, I was there to vote yes. And there are people who support me in this race that at times I can disagree with. But I always treat them with respect. I always treat them with dignity. I don't try to throw one person under a bus. I don't play that kind of game of politics. So let's talk about the day resource shelter, an emergency shelter primarily targeted for men. When we talk about a vote or a conversation that one alder has, it takes the leadership of the mayor to sit down with the county executive and to work through issues. It means that we find a location close to our central isthmus that is able to provide these services, to make sure that it's co-located near services of substance abuse, making sure that therapy can be received, making sure that there's job training. But to understand housing first, before we hit that threshold, the magic number where we can ensure that every single person has a roof over their head, we're talking about years. What are we going to do for the next 5 years? Because to me, it's unacceptable to say that the individuals who are sleeping outside of City Hall will be there 5 years from now. It's unacceptable. You take a look at the issues that I have in my district that I've dealt with over 4 years when we have issues of homelessness on State Street. That's the areas that I represent. And why you see individuals who are sleeping there or instead of some of the stoops is because they feel safer in front of our city council building. They feel safer when they have issues of other areas of mental well-being, that they don't feel claustrophobic when they are in our current shelter system. These are pieces that our advocates have been talking about. They've been talking to our city council members here. They've been talking to our other partners, and we need to do more to listen to them and take action. And these are hard decisions. These are difficult decisions that impact so many. But it's making sure that that safety net is in place so that all Madisonians, whether they have a roof over their head or not, feel welcome in our community.
Thank you. Would you like a rebuttal?
There's 2 things that need to be addressed in rebuttal to this. First of all, the city is the only ones who are doing anything about it. You're well aware that we have made tremendous accommodations both in the design and in the programming of the Central Library. And that's where the services are now being provided. As for the county, let's be clear about this. The county selected Lean Road without telling anyone, and then the county pulled out of Lean Road and went to the town of Madison without telling anyone until they made the announcement.
Thank you. Our next question is one that was submitted from the audience, and while we don't usually identify who the question is from, in this case, this is from Sharon Irwin, Tony Robinson's grandmother. The question is, what are you going to do to stop this extreme violence? We'll start this with Alder Resnick.
It's tragic. I cannot think of what you are going through right now. Because I think about if it was my grandson, it's devastating. No words that anybody would be able to say up here or in the community will bring closure to this. What I will say is that we will hear the call for action. And while we cannot at this time look to do it in the guise of this, while the investigation continues to go on, we will make sure that we have an independent review of how use of force is used in the city of Madison. We'll ensure that we're talking and making sure that there's action in place, whether it's our protocols, whether there's any other decision that could be made to make improvements to our city. Because the reality is, we cannot rest on our laurels. We need to ensure that everyone feels safe in this community, that we rebuild that line of trust, and it's going to take a long time moving forward. So whether it's from independent experts from around the country who have the ideas, whether it's the people in this room, I'm here to hear them, I'm here to investigate them, I'm here to analyze them, and if they are solid decisions that make our police force better, we will implement them. But this is going to be tough. We need to come together as this community.
Thank you. Mayor Soglin?
I find it very, very difficult to address this subject in the context of a mayoral debate, in the context of some of the anger in this room, the larger concern within the community, where parents are concerned about the well-being of their children, where we're all concerned about our neighbors, and a culture of violence in our society. A few blocks from here, on the first Friday of May last year, an angry, challenged person took a knife and cut the throat of a mother and then her daughter. On my own block, we don't know all the circumstances. It's believed it may have to do with a drug deal gone bad. A home was invaded. And down.
Quiet, please. Let's give the candidates the opportunity to speak. Mayor Soglin, do you have anything else to add?
I've got a lot to say.
Please. please. Our next question is also from the audience. What are you doing to address food deserts? We'll start this with Mayor Soglin.
One of the reporters who covered the election 4 years ago made an observation after the first year I'd returned to office, saying, all you do now is talk about food. And as he went through his notes from the campaign, he said neither candidate discussed the subject. First, let's understand that nutrition and hunger is the greatest impediment to a child learning. That is the greatest challenge during the school day. Secondly,
again, our goal is to have a respectful environment for all that are here. Again, the question is, what are you doing to address food deserts in Madison? Mayor Soglin.
Understanding that hunger is the greatest impediment to a child learning during the course of the school day, and then looking at the corporate model for delivering food, inadequate food, food that's not nutritious, and looking at a map of the city of Madison with responsible food outlets, it's very clear that we've got a challenge. In response to that, we put together a food policy task force. It's working on a number of different levels. But one of the things we did is we expanded community gardens. We then went in and did an analysis of what it would take to bring quality, fresh food outlets to the most challenged areas of the city. And I want to mention that this came out of the discussions we had with two specific neighborhoods. One was Darbo-Worthington, and the other was Allied Drive. Both neighborhoods made it clear what the needs were, and that's why we then implemented a program which was designed to provide transportation in the interim, particularly for Allied Drive, now that it's lost its one food outlet, and secondly, to start underwriting the costs of fresh food grocers in those neighborhoods with the objective that every single neighborhood in Madison should have one fresh food outlet within a reasonable walking distance of a half a mile. We are now in the process of developing our public market with the idea that one of the things it will do is it will nurture companies, it'll nurture businesses that will then be able to set up groceries in other locations. I also want to thank the Willie Street Co-op and some of the other grocers in Madison who have offered to help and facilitate in developing these markets in other neighborhoods.
Thank you. Alder Resnick.
Yeah, there are a lot of areas where Paul and I are going to disagree, but this is an area where he deserves a lot of credit. We do have issues with food deserts in Madison, and he has brought new ideas to the table. I've been there to support them. I thank you for creating a food policy coordinator. I think that will help the city of Madison. Now, I could try to nitpick and use hindsight and 20/20 hindsight to say you could have done this, you could have done that, but I'm not going to on this one. You've done a good job in this area. Now I will.
Please.
Now, what I will say is we tried some... Now, there were experiments that didn't always work. We tried the food truck that came out of Fresh Market Madison, which, as a neighborhood president, I helped get in. Now, that experiment didn't work. But I do know that the city is going to continue to try. We're going to continue to innovate and make sure that we eliminate food deserts in the city of Madison.
Thank you. Would you like a rebuttal? Okay. The next question is on urban infill development. Nearly all of Madison's established neighborhoods are facing proposed mixed-use projects that are controversial for their size and anticipated impacts. Can you name a project where neighborhood concerns help to improve the process and eventual project? We'll start with Alder Resnick.
So I serve on the Plan Commission, so it's which of the examples, because there are many. I will say that when it comes to infill development, the biggest challenge that we have right now, whether it's from neighborhood leaders or the development community, truly becomes predictability. We'll have either developers not knowing what they're going to receive from the Urban Design Commission, the Plan Commission, or throughout the process. We have neighborhood leaders who walk in to say, will our plans actually be adhered to this time around? When I look at projects that have been improved, for me it's hard to say ones that weren't approved. When the neighborhood took the time to walk in, to say this is a new project, this is something that we can take responsibility for. I'm thinking of Union Corners first, where you saw a project, and I was able to sit in on a handful of the meetings, where you saw the neighbors and the developer had a different vision for that site. The neighbors wanted to see the density on the corner. That's where the height should be instead of the interior of the parcel. And I believe you have a much better project because we had neighborhood leaders at the table. Our city staff held it to the developer. And that's going to be a successful project because of the outcome. I want to see more of that in our city planning process, in our entire development process, but to make sure that there's predictability in the entire system.
Thank you. Mayor Soglin?
Well, since we adopted the long languishing zoning code rewrite and the downtown plan, there's been obviously a significant amount of new development in the city in the last 2.5 years. There are many examples that I'd point to, ranging from the projects on East Washington Avenue to a number of projects in the Willie Street, Willie Wash corridor. The key, I think, though, is addressing another issue, because we have to, I think, recognize that density is good. Density makes transit systems more efficient, reduce reliance on an automobile. Density brings us closer to work and to where we do our shopping, so we're less reliant even for those tasks with any kind of motorized vehicle. The key, I think, particularly for State Street, for East Washington and Monroe Street, is how do we accommodate new growth but yet protect and preserve the characteristics of those streets. As much as I'm a tremendous advocate for food, I'm deeply concerned, and I refuse to accept the inevitability that local retailers are going to go out of business because of Amazon and eBay. But I'm deeply concerned about food and beverage establishments taking over retail space and all that comes with it in terms of local business, in terms of availability, and things of that sort. The other challenge we've got is the challenges that go back 100 years, which is much of South Park Street, where the city of Madison and the town of Madison intersect. And because the annexation agreement doesn't go into effect until 2023, it's impossible to put together any kind of coherent land use plan, any kind of economic development plan. And that, to me, is one of the great sad parts of the history of this city, where you've got a location that's minutes from the university, minutes from downtown, but yet because of two governments and the fact that we cannot deal with the resolution of annexation, we can't do any kind of development that attracts businesses, that creates jobs. So in closing, there's conflict between the council and the plan commission, the urban design commission, the developers, the neighborhoods, but I think we're resolving it pretty good. The quality of the design is improving. We're getting more and more residential on top of commercial, and that can only be a good thing.
Thank you. Would you like a rebuttal? The next question is on transportation, transit. During the morning rush hour, buses servicing Isthmus neighborhoods are often too full to pick up people waiting at bus stops. At the same time, the city continues to support more infill development, which will mean more residents and potential bus riders. How do you propose that Madison Metro keep up with the additional demand? And conversely, how do we decrease the time it takes for riders to get from one end of town to the other? We'll start with Mayor Soglin.
We've got two specific transportation planning studies undergoing right now. One is a comprehensive multimodal transportation plan looking at the entire city, and the second specifically looks at bus rapid transit. We're doing this planning in a atmosphere where we're going to be basically running up against a wall. That wall being the lack of federal support, because there is no transportation bill, and no support from the state. I think everyone here is well conversed on what the leadership in state government thinks. But for those of us who are optimistic and those of us who believe that we have to solve this problem and we have to have expanded public transit, we are going ahead with planning as though this is a possibility. That includes the concept of a regional transit authority. It's dealing with the issues of the metro bus barns, which are not far from here, where we simply have outgrown their capacity and do not have enough storage facility for them. It has to do with our ability to replace the bus fleet. We not only have to deal with the demand of growing passengers, and by the way, in 2014, we did set a new capacity record of approximately 15 million riders, but it also means we need buses to make bus rapid transit work, which are buses that basically work as though they were part of a rail system. It's a platform where you step into the vehicle. There is no provision for paying a fare when you get on. That's taken care of, as with a train, off-site at a kiosk. The secret to all of this is going to be collaboration with the state and with the federal government. The optimal we can expect from it this time is going to be helping us with the capital costs to buy the buses and to expand our garage space for the facilities. I'm not very optimistic that we're going to continue to get the requisite support in terms of transit fares and subsidization of those fares, even though overall for all units of government, everybody be better off with lower fares and encouraging people to ride a bus or a train, which is much cheaper than building roads and the infrastructure that goes with it.
Thank you. Alder Resnick.
It all comes down to funding. And bus rapid transit, I love the concept. I would love if we could have an RTA here. I would love if that was a realistic possibility for Madison. And in all the investigation I've seen, the conversations I've had, I don't see how we're able to pay for it. and it becomes a shame because I think it would answer so many problems for what we have in the Isthmus. But what we do have is the ability to make smaller improvements, modern improvements to our system. So whether it comes to real-time transit kiosks that you can find in any other major metropolitan city to find out where the bus is. I use the app personally, but not everybody has access to a phone. Making sure that we have those pieces, because I'll tell you, I'm someone, and my wife, who's in the audience, although I can't see her, I would assume she's here, we have one car. We go through life and we share that one vehicle, and I'll say it comes down to where are we going to bike, where I'm the one who doesn't drive, where am I going to bike to, how do I use the bus to get from point A to point B, how do I walk? And the fear of taking the bus, and I'll tell you this is just as a user, it's whether you miss the bus or not. And that psychological burden still is the biggest impediment to riding the bus. So it's figuring out how we can make improvements to our system, how we can improve headways throughout our entire city, looking at onboarding processes that we could do now. If bus rapid transit's able to come online, that's great, but let's see what these technological improvements are today. It also becomes, how do we have less cars on the road? How do we ensure that we have sustainability? So whether that means investing in a park and ride location outside of the Isthmus or at either end to try to make sure there's less people traveling in, to looking towards things like car-to-go, which would allow you to take a vehicle, park it on the street, walk away from it. It's B-cycle for cars. These are areas that other cities are innovating. We can look for effective ways of transportation, but what it's going to mean is we need to continue to connect our entire city, whether it's down here on the Isthmus, whether it's in South Madison, whether it's going from the east side to the west side, because these are going to be the major challenges that we face in the future.
Thank you. Would you like a rebuttal?
I don't like Uber.
So I've heard.
Thank you. On that note, I will do our reintroduction. If you are just joining us now on the radio or online, this is the Madison Mayoral Forum, sponsored by the 5 East Side and downtown neighborhoods and by the Homeless Services Consortium of Madison. We are broadcast live on WART 89.9 FM Madison and isthmus.com. I am your moderator, Renee Lauber. We're asking questions of our 2 candidates, Mayor Paul Soglin and Alder Scott Resnick. The next question is on affordable housing. Madison has a shortage of affordable housing. The market has not provided enough units to meet demand, and federal funds for affordable housing development have dwindled in recent years. How many units do we need, and specifically, how much money would you commit from the city budget? We'll start with Alder Resnick.
We've had this question before, so we'll talk about vacancy rates. What I'm saying right now is it continues to be that we've had historically low vacancy rates, but the luxury units that are coming on site downtown is not going to trickle down to where we need the affordable units. So those individuals that can work downtown, can still find a place to live downtown, is becoming more and more difficult. Now, there are strategies that we can investigate. We, again, could talk about inclusionary zoning. We know what the state has said about that. We know what the courts have said about that. I do believe that there are areas where we can look towards, whether it's a demolition fund, so when we are knocking down affordable housing, looking for different areas where we can create revenue to justify and make sure that that future payment is more than just from our city dollars. Now, when it comes to affordable housing, it is looking for city tax base and looking for those capital expenditures to underwrite affordable housing in areas where land is cheap and we can get the most bang for our buck. It comes back to looking at areas of density that we can improve throughout our entire city to make housing less expensive for individuals. So to answer the question, the dollar amounts that we would put towards the city budget, that's one that I would have to get back to you on because the answer is going to be, no matter what, it's not going to be enough. We're still going to be dealing with issues of affordable housing. It's going to be addressing more than just that one component as well, because it becomes a complex issue of transportation needs, of jobs, of making sure that we do have living wage jobs in the city of Madison, and how we can ensure that a percentage of someone's income as low as possible is going towards housing in our community.
Thank you. Mayor Soglin?
There are two basic sources of funding for affordable housing. One is low-income tax credits, and the other is a new state law that says if you keep a TIF district open one more year, you can take the increment from that year, and there's two things that are different in the law now. One is you can use it for affordable housing, and two, you can use it anywhere in the city, not just in that TIF district. And that is going to be a primary source of funding affordable housing in the next 5 years, hopefully at an average rate of $5 million a year. But if you want to close out TIF 25, as Alderman Resnick does, and give $7 million to the school district, which it needs for next year, that $5 million will not be available for affordable housing. But if you do what I suggest, which is to loan the district the $7 million against the $7 million it's entitled to get when you close the district out, the district gets its $7 million, the school district gets its $7 million, and we get $5 million to build affordable housing. That, to me, is a superior solution. The second thing is the city was remiss for decades, not decades, for years, because the program's only been around about 10, 12 years, using tax credits. Oshkosh was doing it, Kenosha was doing it, Milwaukee was doing it. What was happening in Madison is that the developers were picking sites on their own, coming to the city, and the two of them were not working together. Let's talk about collaboration. So what we went out and did is we identified sites. We identified sites, we notified the developers, you work with us on those sites, and we will go as a team to WIDA, and we will get approvals. And by the way, one of the things we also did is we asked WIDA to change its standards, because WIDA awarded more points if you put the housing in a low-income neighborhood. And we said, why do you want to concentrate low-income housing? Don't you want economic dispersion? Don't you want economic integration? And so now we have got 5 projects right now this month in front of WIDA. All of them are viable, and we're hoping that they will give us 3 awards, 3 of these projects in the coming months. Next, you have to have a mayor who is willing to stand up when a neighborhood says we don't want affordable housing at Resnick or in Alder, or when an
Thank you, Mayor Soglin.
All power to the people! All power to the people!
Rebuttal?
We keep on talking about Resnick, and as someone on the Plan Commission who pushed forward with the project, someone who took the leadership on council to actually vote for the project and support it, well, thank you. When we talk about the TIF district and the $7 million going back to the school district, we could be pushing forward with that affordable housing today. We could say, this is our year, let's move forward with the affordable housing, and let's get the school district their money back, not a loan back, but let's do it within the next year. We could be taking those actions. Instead, we've put the money aside so we can ensure that we have money for Judge Doyle Square, so that we can negotiate from that position. So this isn't about the affordable housing argument. This isn't about the school district argument, although it does play into this. It all comes back to where are our priorities of the city. So you can move around the funds all you want. But what we can do is we can take tangible steps, and what I'll tell you is it'll get us a better outcome on that parcel if we do move forward with closing down that TIF district.
Thank you.
On the street right now. You're sitting up here talking about these different policies and these different discussions that you're having, and people are on the street right now. Families on the street right now. You're talking about a judge circle, and people are on the street right now. You're talking about housing a business, and people are on the street needing houses right now.
Are we
And
going
all
to
you
go on
can do
with
is
the
blame this
discussion?
on somebody else, and it's your responsibility. You gotta run this business. You gotta run the business. Fund the house for Backpack Jeff. Fund the house for William, who is homeless right now.
Thank you. Again, our goal is a respectful environment where everybody can be heard.
All power to the people. All power to the people.
Our next question. As mayor, how will you promote more Black-led businesses in Madison's economy? Please be specific. This will start with Mayor Soglin.
The city is completing a disparity study which was begun a year and a half ago. And by the way, Alderman Resnick complains that the city of Madison council adopted it in 2013, and it took a year until the study was underway. What happened in that period of time? What happened, Alderman Resnick, is that we worked with the Latino Chamber of Commerce, with 100 black men, and other leaders of the Latino and the African American community, listening to them so they could design the study. That's what was going on during that period of time. We met monthly for 12 months, designing the study, making sure that it met all legal requirements, and then as soon as it was prepared, we went out to bid. Now we've got it back, and we know exactly what we need to do to get more city contracts into the hands of MBEs and women-owned businesses. That is something that we have been doing for several years in a commitment to ending inequities in the letting of public dollars. Didn't get a lot of headlines, wasn't done in a public showroom. It was hard-working people making a commitment to solve a problem. Just this last month, in conclusion of work we had done on procurement, we had a session which was attended by over 50 people who are either suppliers or wanting to go into business, providing supplies for city procurement. This is another example of working with people in the city of Madison and Dane County in developing programs to guarantee equity in the expenditure of public dollars. In addition to that, we've got a program on the Construction Employment Initiative, working with the unions and the contractors to ensure recruitment into apprenticeship and union-trained programs. It's going further than that. Right now, this very month, the Civil Rights Office is reviewing contractors' proposals for meeting goals in regards to hiring. But the important thing that we're focusing on is retention, creating a workplace environment which is sustainable, which is conducive to people getting training and eventually being a spot where you can open your own business, because you can't own a plumbing business or a contracting business unless you know the trade.
Thank you. Alder Resnick.
If it took a year and you were meeting monthly, why wasn't it bi-weekly? If this was such a critical problem facing the city of Madison. When you take a look at someone who has started a company, someone who has built a business, there are pieces that are critical. And one of the top pieces is financing. And what the research shows is particularly people of color, immigrants, and women struggle to find the same financing that white men receive. This was a recommendation that came down from 2001 that the city of Madison needs to be investing capital funds and seed funding to make sure minority businesses can find the resources and the partnerships in seed funding to make sure they can get off the ground. Now, we've been looking at areas, and as a member of the City Council, proposed doing this for women-led businesses, and we need to go much further than that. I take a look at what I'm working on right now with members of the community in a project called Starting Block. This is going to be an entrepreneurial hub. It's going to go across from the Constellation Project on East Washington, 55,000 square feet. So the materials and things that are going on at Sector 67, exploring 3D printing, how do you use a mill or a lathe, how do you work with new technologies, can be enjoyed right here. And what we've talked about and have gone in many of our planning is saying, how do we make sure that that is a welcoming place for every single race, for someone of every single age, and is a welcoming location for anyone to start a business right here in Madison? Because you see the entrepreneurial talent that is right in our city. You see it in South Park Street. I was there for a community event. It was someone who was building bikes and wanted to know, how do I start a company itself? We're going to be able to do this, but what we need to see is new businesses that are starting up, that it's led by women, by people of color, and making sure that we have these small businesses that are thriving right here in our community.
Thank you for better answering my question.
Rebuttal.
Alderman Resnick, the pace of the work on the disparity study was set by the members of the Latino Chamber of Commerce, the Minority Business Contractors Association, and 100 black men, all of whom have other jobs and other responsibilities. We went at the pace that they set, and we did not want to have any sessions or planning without them. I'm glad you mentioned the financing, because it reminds me that we put $1 million for workers' cooperatives in this year's budget.
Thank you. Police body cameras are considered a done deal for Madison, yet they are very expensive, raise privacy and rights concerns, and do not guarantee justice. Should we reconsider putting scarce resources towards cameras? We'll start with Alder Resnick.
This was something that was controversial that I brought up to the City Council. I'm aware that not everybody will agree with that decision, but I do believe that we should have moved forward with a pilot for police body cameras. When you take a look at what's being done on this issue in Milwaukee, in Chicago, in Minneapolis, in McFarland, that's right. There are...
Again, please, let's give the candidates a chance. Let's hear from the candidates.
Body...
This is your question. This is a question from the audience.
And we've had this conversation before. When it comes to body cameras, it's only a tool. Thank you. They're only a tool. It's not going to solve the issues of racial disparity, but it does give us an insight that nothing else can provide. Being in place. So I felt it was appropriate to start a pilot project here in Madison. There are major issues to still be resolved. You have issues. You have issues of privacy. Yes. You have issues of which officer should be wearing it. We listened to the gang unit officers. We listened to those who might be investigating a sexual assault. And the police department said not everybody, that not everybody should be with a camera. And we listened to that feedback. But what I...
Please, let's listen to the candidate on this.
Listen to the people most impacted.
So right now, the City Council is going to listen to the people that are most impacted. We are going to continue to study the issue. Now, sometimes I want to move faster than others want to, but I understand. But I believe that we're now on the right path with body cameras. We still need to deal with the technology solutions. There are still server costs. There's still maintenance to these cameras. These are all issues, but they're also being solved in McFarland and elsewhere.
What parts of the city will the cameras be tested in?
That was going to be up to...
Makes sense to me.
When we were asking the chief to where, we were letting the chief decide what was the best community to put it in place.
Thank you. Mayor Soglin?
The question said now that they're a done deal. I'm not sure that they are a done deal. We've got some very serious issues with the use of the body cameras, first of which is the cost worth it for the return in terms of what this community can invest in, particularly in non-law enforcement activities designed to bring greater equity to the community. But the second part of the problem, the challenge, is that we have a divided community on the question of body cameras. There are a number of groups, particularly women's organizations, that are very fearful as to the dampening effect that body cameras may have in regards to victims of domestic abuse and violence coming forward and describing their plight. There's also concern within the Latino community because of the impact it may have on those who are in the shadows and the risk to them of being recorded by law enforcement and whether or not it'll have consequences that lead to deportation. I have no idea what the outcome of the study will be, but it's going to take us about 3 or 4 months, and then we'll all have more answers.
Thank you. Rebuttal?
Great job. Great answer, Mayor.
Thank you. Another question from the audience tonight. How will you deal with racial disparities in police arrests and use of deadly force unnecessarily? Please be specific. 2 exclamation points.
We've been looking at the data on the disparity arrests in Madison and Dane County. The first thing that we've learned, and I think it's very important that we learn what is going on if we're going to seriously address this problem, is that the arrests are not taking place in neighborhoods. The arrests are taking place at commercial areas, retail stores, bus transfer points, places where young people are likely to congregate. That's the first thing. The second thing, and we've done something very specific, which is the restorative justice program in the South Police District, which is starting up this year. But what we think is happening, and we don't have the data analysis yet, is it's not that there are 8 African American young men being arrested for every white young men. But what's happening is young African American men are being repeatedly arrested. That is what we... When we look at the criminal justice system, what I think we will find, and this is where it becomes critical in terms of what our community does, is that once the arrest is effected, there is a significant difference in terms of outcome in prosecution and in penalties. And what is going on is that white youth is able to get into a restorative justice program, is able to get into a divergence program, where the African American kid, the African American youth, is basically sent back out into the streets and is not going through any kind of counseling, any kind of support system, so as to avoid rearrest. And then the arrests start piling up. And then one day there are so many of them that the kid ends up with one of 2 options: either prison, or if they're lucky enough to avoid it, the neighborhood intervention program administered by the county. But the point is, what's happening in the system is that the African American young men are principally ignored in terms of the outcome after that first arrest. And then we start seeing the recidivism and then the pipeline of what's referred to as classroom to prison.
Thank you. Alder Resnick.
I said we've got the restorative court in the South Police District. Aren't you listening?
Again. Thank you.
You want to repeat the question so I answer?
Okay, I have been asked to repeat the question, so I will. How will you deal with racial disparities in police arrests and use of deadly force unnecessarily? Please be specific.
Let's start with deadly force. We do need to conduct an independent review to ensure that each piece of our process, when it does come to deadly force, has the right protocols in place. It needs to be independent. It needs to have leaders throughout the entire community, those who are experts in the subject, those who reside here in Madison and are citizens, those groups who have been fighting these issues from day one. We need to be looking at areas of review, whether it comes down to our police protocols, to our training, because I do know Madison can be the best place in the community that restores our same principles of respect and access with law enforcement. But it's going to take time, it's going to take healing, and it's going to take accountability. When we talk about accountability, not on that point, but on accountability of the data that we're coming back with. We're talking about numbers that right now are in 2013 that are locked up in a PDF file. We haven't seen the 2014 numbers. They're not available to the public. That's not what occurs in Chicago. That's not what occurs in Philadelphia. That's not what occurs in most cities. So if we're going to be accountable to the public, we need to have a transparent system in place. When it comes to restorative justice, the program isn't online yet in South Madison. Now, there might be a model to expand that elsewhere, but we need to ensure that we're looking back and have the right measures of metrics to see if it's having success. But it's focusing on kids and youth before they're involved in the criminal justice system. It's focusing on areas of mentorship, it's focusing on areas of jobs, and it's ensuring that students aren't let through the cracks here in Madison.
What about killer cops?
That's what we're going to need to be addressing here in Madison, because restorative justice is fine, but it's trying to capture those youth before they're in the system.
What about before they get
Thank you. Would you like a rebuttal?
Police has not been murdered in Wisconsin since 1932. We've had 15 civilians killed by police officers in the last few years.
And the adults are 11 and 1, not the youth. What are you talking about?
These are challenging times for the city of Madison, for the East Side neighborhoods, for everyone, for Black people. This concludes our mayoral forum. I would like to thank you all for coming. I would like to thank our candidates, Mayor Paul Soglin and Alder Resnick, for joining us tonight. I appreciate your time. The general election is Tuesday, April 7th. Please vote.